Oh, hey, didn't see you there. I was just going over my notes, for this show, the podcast. This is the Brew Party podcast, episode number 65. I'm your host, who definitely doesn't know the most, Andy Hopper, bringing you another fire episode of the Brew Party. Welcome in, join the party, the party goers. We don't really have a name for the fan base, all 15 of you, whoever's still listening to this, still watching this, I do thank you. So, don't mind me if I'm looking a little slimmer. Your boy's back in the fitness game, and by fitness, I mean trying to take my fat ass on a run. I cannot say that I've been doing it every day, but for about 2 weeks, I've been trying to. I think I've only missed like 2 or 3 days, maybe 4 days at the most, trying to go 3 miles. I'm fat as shit. But I'm definitely the type of person that does one workout and is like, okay, why the hell am I not skinny now? Like, where are my results at after day one? I don't know if anybody else is like that. It was like, why the fuck is this still here? Sorry you had to see that or hear that. If you're listening to the podcast, I just grabbed my stomach and jiggled it a little bit. Not missing much on the audio side there. But yeah, getting back into the swing of like running and stuff has been very weird. Ooh, there's some thunder outside. I shouldn't say weird, but just like it feels good, but it's like, fuck, I'm fat and I'm out of shape and I'm slow, but I'm doing it. So it feels good. And I just had to share it with somebody that, you know what, I'm trying to, hopefully, as these recordings go on, as the YouTube videos go on, I'll just be slimmer and slimmer and slimmer, if I start eating like a normal person and not like a child. Maybe that would help. So let me tell you a little bit about this episode. I'm going to be joined by the creator, the founder of From the Stands Sports, my friend Brian McArdle. He is the man behind From the Stands. So we do a weekly college football show. I'm actually a part of From the Stands. Brian was gracious enough to bring me onto the team list this past year. So we do a weekly college football show, kind of game day style, but not exactly that. We put a fresh spin on it. It's by fans, for fans. We're bringing you college football news from, each of our specific programs that we follow all around the country. We do superlatives, a bunch of different cool segments. So definitely check out From the Stands. We're on Facebook. Just search From the Stands Sports. We're on Twitter. Same thing, From the Stand Sports, or YouTube, From the Stand Sports as well. So, before we get into this interview with Brian McArdle, I guess I should tell you what we talk about in the interview. I bring Brian on to talk about the college football playoff, this new proposal for college football expansion. The playoff has been 4 teams for the past 7 years. Apparently, there's been a secret committee for the past 2 years planning this proposal God damn it, I cannot talk. Planning this proposal for the college football playoff to expand from 4 to 12 teams. People have said 6, people have said 8. The 12 is apparently the number they're going with. I really like the proposal. Brian does too. There are a few things that we would like to tweak and change up a little bit, but me and Brian dive into this, talk about if we think it's going to pass, if we think or when we could see this in college football, how it will affect the landscape, will be it close the gap between the top teams and those middle tier Power 5 teams as well. A lot of good stuff in this interview, and it's less than an hour. How about that? Haters said we couldn't do it. So hopefully my little spiel here will be less than 10 minutes so I can make sure everything lines up. So let's get into my little spiel then. I'm going to be quick. NBA playoffs, they're still rolling on, so I got to talk about it because the last time I did, I talked shit about the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm not going to lie. The Nets were up 2-0. 2-0. They were rolling. It didn't really seem close. The Bucks have clawed their way back and made this a series, folks. Game 7 is going to be Saturday night. I guess we do have to state the obvious. Kyrie Irving got hurt. He is out indefinitely. I believe it is hold on. I wrote it down. Hold on. Ankle injury, ladies and gentlemen. Kyrie has nursing that ankle. Hopefully he gets better soon. So just serious change when Kyrie went out. A lot of pressure on KD to, lead this team. That's already a question for the Nets this whole year was depth. and injuries. Their big three was never healthy, didn't really play together a lot, and it is now coming true in the playoffs. So James Harden got hurt like 49 seconds into game one. He hurt his hamstring. He decided to come back and play. In his first game back in game five, he was 1 for 10 from the field, didn't really do much. But game six, 16 points, 7 assists. Looked a little bit better out there, like he was a little more into the flow of things. I mean, ironically, the Nets won game five when he was 1 for 10 from the field, and they lose when he's 16 points and 7 assists. But they won game five because that was the Kevin Durant game. The Kevin Durant legacy game, ladies and gentlemen, will go down in history as one of the best playoff performances in the history of the NBA. 49 points, 17 rebounds, 10 assists in 48 minutes. He played every single minute of the game, and he just balled out. Milwaukee had no answer for him. That is going to be the big question for me in Game 7 for the Bucks. How do they adjust on defense? Who guards Kevin Durant? Can they keep up with Kevin Durant, or is he just going to be a man on a mission again? In Game 6, in the loss, 32 points, 11 boards. The whole series, he's been able to do absolutely whatever he has wanted. So the question for the Nets is, how much are you getting from Durant? Is he going to have to play 48 minutes again? And then is James Harden going to be ready? Is he going to be 100%? I think I already know the answer to that is no, but are you going to get more than 16 points from a guy that can go for 40 or 50? Are you going to get more from Joe Harris, who was only 1 for 3 from three-point land in Game 6 and with 9 points? Are you going to get more from break of the year, Blake Griffin? Are you going to get more who, 12 and 6 in Game 6, but at the latter half of that game, he kind of disappeared and didn't do anything. And then Jeff Green, he had an awesome performance in Game 5. He, along with Kevin Durant, paced the Nets. Jeff Green had 27 points on 7 of 8 shooting from three-point land in Game 5. Game 6, he follows it up with a 5-point performance. That just can't happen. The Nets need some support for Kevin Durant. He can't do it all by himself, or can he? Will he kind of cement more things in his legacy? I know a lot of people say if Kevin Durant can get a third championship this year, he will be entered into that GOAT conversation. A lot of people think he's the best player on the planet at this point too. So very, very curious to see how this goes. The injuries really suck for the Nets, and then I guess that is a cop-out if they lose. It's like, oh, well, Harden and Kyrie are hurt. On the Bucks side of things, I mean, you have to give a shout out to Chris Middleton. 38, 10, and 5 in Game 6. The best playoff performance he's had in his career. Career high in points. Giannis, another solid game, 30 and 17. Drew Holiday contributes 21 points. Talk about big threes. The Bucks' big three has been terrific. Middleton has stepped up. Giannis has played great. He can't fucking hit a free throw, and he takes 12 seconds to shoot a free throw. Longest fucking free throw shooter I think I've ever seen. But they have been amazing this series. Since going down 2-0, they've responded. They've come together as a team. They've led this team, and they're gonna have to be huge. They're gonna have to keep it going in Game 7. But I think they have just as good of a chance as anybody to win the whole thing if they're able to take care of Game 7. One thing I will say: the home team is 6-0 in this series. Game 7 is in Brooklyn. And the Nets are favored by 1. It's going to be an awesome Game 7. The best 2 words in sports, ladies and gentlemen. Game 7. And we have 2 of them in the Eastern Conference. Let's go to the other one. The 76ers forced a Game 7 against the Atlanta Hawks. So the Sixers in Game 5 actually blew a 26-point lead. The Hawks seemed to take control of the series. They were up. The Sixers were able to hold them off. Collins had that big suplex slam on Embiid. They kind of were going back and forth at it all night. Trae Young leads all scorers. He had 34 and 12 assists, but he was only 2 for 9 from the field in the fourth quarter. Really kind of shit the bed later in the game. And, speaking of later in the game, Doc Rivers and the Philly coaching staff could not get Ben Simmons off the floor faster than when there was like 2 minutes left, maybe even less than that, when Atlanta has to start fouling. They were escorting him off like a president during during an active shooter situation. I don't know who I saw that from on Twitter, but that was an actually incredible joke. Embiid had a great game, 22, 13 boards. He was a menace on the offensive glass, especially near the end of the game. A lot of big offensive rebounds for him. Our boy Ben Simmons, 6 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. Curry and Tobias Harris had 24 points each. Seth Curry and Tobias Harris are legit. They're 2 and 3 scoring options. They are better scoring options than Ben Simmons. I didn't think I was going to be saying that during this postseason. I want to give a shout out to Tyrese Maxey, the rookie out of Kentucky. Had a solid night off the bench. He had 16 points. I think he grabbed 7 boards as well, but played really good D on Trae Young when he came in, gave Doc Rivers some solid minutes. This one went down to the wire. I don't want to act like the Sixers were completely dominant the whole game because they kind of had to just fend off Atlanta. They were kind of lurking the whole game. They were there. They were around. Of course, I don't have the final score in front of me, but all I know is the Sixers won. We're going to Game 7. It's going to be very interesting in Philly. I think Trae Young's going to go for like 40 points. I think he's going to put on a show. I do think the Sixers win. Is the over-under on Ben Simmons' points? What is it, 5.5 for Game 7? That's what I want to see. Hammer the under, maybe? I don't know. This is going to be very interesting. On the Atlanta side, they have to get more from John Collins and Bogdanovich. Jesus Christ, I cannot speak. They only had 7 points each night, and they're Atlanta's 2 and 3 options. They're going to have to be better. It's the same thing with the Nets. Trae Young needs help, just like Kevin Durant is going to need help. Kevin Huerter, he had a solid game, 17, and then Gallo, 16 off the bench. That's great, but you have to have more from Collins. God damn it. Collins and Bogey in Game 7, or the Hawks are going home. Then the big news of the night, the Clippers. Holy shit, the Los Angeles Clippers are going to their first ever Western Conference Finals without their best player, Kawhi Leonard, out indefinitely, possible ACL tear. We don't know. Led by Terrence Mann. That's right, the Terrence Mann game. 39 points, 7 for 10 from three-point land. Paul George chipping in 28, 9, and 7. We had Reggie Jackson with 27 and 10 of his own. Huge game from the Clippers. They were down by 25 points with 10 minutes left in the third quarter, and they're able to claw their way back. Utah had control of this game. Mike Conley, his first game back, you thought, okay, this is going to be really, really in favor of the Jazz. It gives them more stability at the one, a legit playmaker, somebody that can distribute the ball that they had been lacking earlier in this series. And he didn't look great, guys. He didn't look 100%. He had 5 points, 2 boards, 3 assists. Rudy Gobert chips in 12 and 10. A double-double for him. We know what he brings defensively. Jordan Clarkson, 6th man of the year, 21 points off the bench. Donovan Mitchell was a rebound and an assist away from a playoff triple-double. He has another awesome performance, 39, 9, and 9. A lot of nines there, but the Jazz are going home. The number 1 seed in the West get upset. I'm going to say, yeah, they got upset by the Clippers. Good for the Clippers. Good for Paul George. Playoff P. Everybody knows the jokes that everybody makes about him. They're very well documented. I wrote down like one of the biggest blown leads in the playoffs, but I just said Philly blew a 26-point lead a couple days ago. It's just, this playoffs has been wild. So that sets up the Western Conference Finals. It's Clippers. It's the Clippers. It's the Phoenix Suns. Gonna be interesting, especially because Kawhi Leonard, who I mentioned earlier, out indefinitely. CP3 on the Phoenix side, out indefinitely in COVID protocol. Do we see either of these guys in these series? I think it's a lot more likely to see Chris Paul than we see Kawhi Leonard in the Western Conference Finals. But man, this is shaping up to be a good one. I think Phoenix would have rather had the Clippers than Utah, just because the different matchups that Utah presents for Phoenix. But man, Booker's been having a great playoffs. DeAndre Ayton's coming into his own, and then Chris Paul Chris Paul, proven why he's one of the best point guards to ever play the game of basketball. So that is my NBA update. Western Conference Finals. The Los Angeles Clippers making their first ever appearance. The Phoenix Suns are back in the Western Conference Finals for the first time in who fucking knows how long. And then on the Eastern side, we have 2 Game 7s, ladies and gentlemen. The Bucks and the Nets, and the Sixers and the Hawks. I think the finals are wide open. But I'm not saying they couldn't win, but I'm just saying the Hawks, if they were to, I'd be most surprised. I'd love to see the Suns win. I know it's not a fun pick, but I'd like to see the Nets win as well. But I think the Bucks have a very, very good opportunity to win the championship if they are able to take care of business in Game 7 versus the Brooklyn Nets. Okay, so obviously I'm done rambling. This has been the intro. God damn it. This has been the intro for episode 65 of the Brew Party podcast. Make sure you give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram at the Brew Party. We're also on Facebook at the Brew Party podcast. Go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/the Brew Party. You can find the podcast wherever you get your podcast: Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Pandora, Pocket Cast, anywhere you get your podcast. Just search The Brew Party, throw us in the Google machine, The Brew Party, or go to thebrewparty.com. It has all of our social media links. It has all of our episodes with links on where to listen. Anywhere, anything you need, Brew Party, www.thebrewparty.com. Join the party. Tell a friend who tells a friend who tells a friend. Let's get this going. Let's get it to be a real big shindig, huh? So, God damn it, I'm an idiot. I was going to say something else. What else was I going to say? I don't know. Enjoy this interview with the one and only Brian McArdle from the Stands College Sports. Oh, I remembered. Throw us a review on Apple Podcasts. We're trying to get up to 100 ratings and reviews. If we do, we got a special guest who said he would come on if we got to that point. So give us a rating, give us a review on Apple Podcasts. So just search The Brew Party. Thank you, as always, for being here, for joining the party, whether you're listening, whether you're watching. Give us a retweet, give us a share, share the episode, share the clips. Like I said, we'd love to have you. We'd love to have any friends, anybody that would like to sit here and listen to my dumb ramblings, my dumb jokes, shit that makes myself laugh. I'm a big fan of you too. So this is the Brew Party podcast, episode number 65. Let's get to this interview with the one and only Brian McArdle from the Stands College Sports. Take one last swig. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are. This is the Brew Party podcast, episode number 65. I'm joined by a very good friend of mine from the Stands College Sports. It is Brian McArdle, the founder, or resident UCF fan. We're here to talk some college football today. We're talking about this college football playoff expansion, the 12-team proposal that just came out last week. We're going to share our thoughts just because we do a weekly college football show during the football season. Brian was kind enough to bring me on the show, so let's talk about that a little bit. You're the founder of From the Stands College Sports. This is what, 2 years now, or one?
Two seasons through.
So how did you kind of come up with this idea? What's it all about?
Yeah, so I'm not even sure I explained this to you when I first hit you up. Maybe a little bit. I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But for anyone familiar with Reddit, I took to the college football subreddit, RCFB, and I just kind of brought the idea to them. Everyone, these days is hating, the mouse running the show at ESPN. They have to kind of hold their lips a little bit on what they say. Everything's kind of scripted. So I just brought the idea to them, why don't we just bring a show to the fans, from the people that watch it, the fans themselves. So we got a great group of people that helped put the show together. Unfortunately, COVID kind of derailed us a little bit last season. We lost some guys who couldn't come in, host the show, help out because the obvious. But yeah, we still managed to put together a season last season, thanks to you and Tom helping come out and host. So yeah, looking forward to another new season coming up in late August.
Yeah, so that was really fun. I always look forward to that every week, talking football and basically like a game day type show, like Brian said. We're all college football fans. Like Brian's a UCF fan. I'm an Illinois fan. Tom, who did the show with us, was a Notre Dame fan. We're giving our opinions, on our teams, on all of college football, all of that good stuff. And it's not like just plain stats and everything. Brian comes up with like very good list of topics, different segments that we do. We keep it fresh, keep it fun. You can check that out on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram too, right? Just From the Stands Sports. Is it?
No Instagram. Got
No Instagram. Everything
Twitter,
else.
Twitter, Facebook, YouTube.
Yeah.
No TikTok either.
So so let's get into this, man. You're the college football playoff expansion proposal. So currently, the past 7 years, it's been 4 teams. It's pretty much been the Bama, Clemson, and Ohio State show. And now we have a new proposal that has came out. The college football committee, which I believe is like 11 or 12 members, various executives from different universities around the country. They appointed this expansion committee, which was made up of Bob Bowlesby, the commissioner of the Big 12, Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, Craig Thompson, the commissioner of the Mountain West, and then Jack Swarbrick, Tom Scavetta's guy, the athletic director of Notre Dame. So they came up with this idea. They want to expand the football playoff to 12 teams. So that would mean 6 conference champions would get in. Obviously, the 5 Power 5 conference champs would get in, and then 1 group of 5, the highest ranked group of 5 conference champion would get that automatic 6th spot. So it's guaranteeing a spot for a group of 5 team in the playoffs, something that has never happened in the history of college football. The top 4 teams would get a first round bye. That would mean that Notre Dame would never be eligible to get a first round bye because they do not play in a conference. And then rounding it out would be 6 at-large bids. That could be Power 5 teams. That could be other group of 5 teams. Pretty much, the top 12 teams are going to get in. So, when this first came out, what was kind of your initial reaction to this? Because I'm like, in my perspective, like this kind of came out of nowhere. They've been keeping this in secret for like 2 years, secret meetings in hotels across the country, with paper notes and making brackets out of tape, putting it on the wall, kind of trying to visualize everything. They said, they looked at 6 teams, they looked at 8 teams, they looked at staying at 4. They said they got up to like 24 team model, like the FCS does. So what are your thoughts? Do you think 12 is a good number for the college football playoff?
So yeah, like you said, came out of left field completely here. And 12 was not a number I think I ever considered, actually. So it was interesting to first hear them come out and say that out of the blue like that. Personally, 8 teams was the go-to for me. I think a lot of people saw 8 teams as the most likely scenario where there's parity, but all the big Power 5 conferences kind of get what they want, which is a guaranteed spot. It's I don't know. It's interesting because obviously most people want expansion on some point. So I don't want to say I don't like it entirely because we're getting more teams, we're getting more games, more people have a chance, or more teams have a chance, I guess I should say. But I think 8 was probably the sweet spot. But we're getting more playoff games, so you can't complain too much. I think people going as far as saying 16, I don't think that was ever going to be a plausible solution, or anything above 16. Like you said, they reviewed 24 as a possibility. That's just, at that point, you're getting too many games and there's too much travel, especially with the announcement that at least the first round for the beginning of this new scenario will be played at the higher seeds home stadium, which I think is a great addition, by the way. So that'll be nice to see. But yeah, I think the message here is that we got what we wanted for the people that were complaining about 4 teams being too exclusive of the rest of college football. So I'll take it for now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great. Like you said, it did kind of come out of left field. I never saw 12 teams being the thing. I thought maybe 6 would be the next logical thing because just seemed like they'd be very conservative about it and not really want to change up what they're doing. Yeah, with the 12 team proposal, all 130 teams in the NCAA would technically have a chance if they go undefeated. Like going into the season, they know if we go undefeated, if we win our conference championship, we have an actual chance to be in the college football playoff. It guarantees a spot. at least one spot for a G5 team, which is something that has never happened before. And then it adds a mandatory importance to the conference championship games. More teams are actually going to care about winning this conference championship and getting that auto bid. And then the on-campus playoff games is something you mentioned in the first round. Is actually something I wanted to get to. So I think it's like the 5 through the 9 or 5 through the 8 seeds would host a playoff game in the first round, which would be incredible. But the problem I have with it is the top 4 teams, they get a first round bye. That quarterfinal game that would be in the second round would be at like a bowl site, like a Rose Bowl or a Sugar Bowl. Do you think that's fair? Don't you think one of like the top 4 teams should get to host a playoff game?
Well, personally, I don't like the buys to begin with at all.
Okay.
I'll start with that. That's like you said, 6 teams also would have got 1 and 2 would have got a buy. At this level, I don't think. I mean, obviously the NFL, football, they also play about 16 games, which is what college football will probably be playing if you make it into those 5 through 12 seeds in this new format. I think. I mean, some of these kids are still 18 years old, and you're putting them through possibly another 3 games of these aren't low tier bowl games where you might be half assing it. This is it's technically now the playoff once you're in the top 12. These kids are going to be beating the hell out of each other for an extra 3 games. If you're a team that's in it for the most part every single year, like your Clemson's, your Alabamas, Ohio State, that's an extra 3 games per year for at least 3 years. So some guys will go pro early, but an extra 9 games of just getting the hell beat out of you by other top teams. It's interesting because they try to, most leagues try to say player safety is a big is big or high on their list, I guess, of priorities. And I think giving these teams a bye doesn't really reflect that. But as far as those games being on campus, if they do have to play that extra game, like I said, I'm for that because the environments of some of these stadiums, say if Penn State squeaks in there in the top 8 and gets their home game, that's a fantastic stadium to be sold out. COVID's pretty much gone at this point. Oh, there goes that light.
There it goes again. I completely agree with you bring up a good point. That is a lot of extra games on these, young athletes' bodies. And, we did see guys opting out of bowl games. I don't think we see guys opt out of playoffs, but maybe sit for a first round and save themselves for quarterfinals if they're playing for a team like Bama, Clemson, Ohio State. I mean, speaking of those teams, will this change the power dynamic of college football at all? Will any other teams be able to, let's say close the gap or catch these top 3 teams who I said earlier, it's basically been their invitational, the college football playoff these last 4 years or last 7 years?
Yeah, I do think so. A big part of that, I think, is the new transfer rules, which these 2 things going hand in hand and being announced, at a pretty similar time frame, I think is a very interesting play because for those not familiar with the new transfer rules, not only can you transfer without sitting to any other team, you can also now do that in conference, which was not allowed before. So, we'll see kids swapping between SEC teams that are, maybe you got whooped by Alabama, but you're a top talent at, Tennessee or Ole Miss, and you're like, hey, I want to go to that school if they want me. They're in the playoffs all the time. But I think also now the power dynamic as a whole, those teams that you mentioned that are in it every year, Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, most kids want to be in the playoff, right? No one who's a top 4 or 5-star recruit is thinking, I don't want to play in the playoff. I'll go to a team that doesn't have a chance. And before this, when we were still at 4 teams, most kids are trying to get into those 3 schools for the most part because they know for a fact those schools have a chance, at the top prize in college football
every year.
Now, now by getting us to this 12-team format, you're going to get, I don't want to say middle tier, but the teams that aren't in it every year have a much better shot, sliding in there 2 or 3 of the years that these kids will be in college, they don't need to, hit up every Alabama, Ohio State coach and say, hey, I want to come play with you. They can now say, hey, Penn State might be good enough to slide in there into the playoff.
Or
People probably want me to say Michigan as well here, but I think we'll leave them out. But yeah, similar for G5 teams, like you mentioned, this is pretty much guaranteed now. At least one G5 conference winner getting in. So, for your UCFs, for your Coastal Carolinas, these are now schools that have an actual shot at getting in. And what I think is most interesting, you mentioned that I know things aren't fully developed yet and rules haven't been entirely set, but for this past season, we would have actually gotten two G5 teams into those guaranteed conference champion spots because obviously the Pac-12 shit the bed last year. Oregon, the best team, would not have qualified under the rules. So we would have got either Coastal Carolina or I believe Louisiana Lafayette. They were tied in the Sun Belt, and then also the winner of the AAC, which is Cincinnati. So, one G5 team, I think everyone that's a fan of a G5 team was very happy or would have been very happy to get at least one. Now there's a scenario where you might slide in two. So that's, that's pretty big for all those teams.
So as a UCF guy, does this leave a little saltiness? Like where the fuck was this 12 team a few years ago when you guys were just absolutely rolling?
Yeah, a little bit. Obviously, you don't want to get caught up in the past.
Yeah.
But I still think the way the school is going, despite losing our AD, who's very good, went to Tennessee. Obviously, I think the team and the school athletic department is still in a good spot, and in the future, I think we will slide in there. Cincinnati is looking very good as a team. And again, now this new scenario where they can get into the playoff by winning the AAC, this is going to help their recruiting in the Ohio area.
Mm-hmm.
Kids who couldn't get into Ohio State and maybe went to other Big Ten teams now might be considering Cincinnati. So that'll be an interesting team to watch in the AAC. I wish I could say, UCF will take home all the conference titles there, but some good teams in the AAC. So it'll be interesting to see which ones can slide into the playoffs in these. Once we get started here, and I think 2025 is what they're looking for to start this.
I think so.
So we got a few years.
The committee will decide on the proposal next Tuesday, so that'd be the 22nd of June. Okay. And then we'll know. So I guess I hadn't heard the timeline of when, but 2025 sounds about right. If we're talking about UCF here for just a second, so in 2017, UCF would have been the number 12 seed. They would have gone up against number 5 Alabama for the right to play Ohio State. And then in 2018, they would have been the number 8, and they would have played number 9 Washington for the right to play number 1 Alabama. So if this would have been, like, you guys would have been in the playoff, that would have been awesome, but that would have been quite a tough road for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, everyone always says during those two seasons, the signs were in the crowds, we want Bama. Mm-hmm. We would have got what we were asking for. Probably not going to win that game, but
that would have been sick.
Right. The moral of the story is we actually get a chance to play them. So, I mean, sure, Alabama might roll by 30 points. That team, that was a very good team there in 2018, but we had a chance to play them had that, 12-team scenario been around back then. So, I think giving all these teams a chance is the main thing here. What I will bring up quickly on that is of all professional and college sports, D1 college football has the least or the lowest payout of playoff spots compared to the number of teams active in that sport at 3.1%. There's obviously 130 teams. Only 4 of them could make the playoff. In this potential scenario, we'll see on the 22nd, I guess, where we get the 12 teams. That is then bumped up to 9.2%, which is still would be the lowest out of all sports, but it's tripling what you've got there. Compared to other college sports, NCAA hockey is at 26%, soccer is at 24%, baseball at 21%, and basketball, which you would think would be pretty low because there's 350 teams, that 68 team bracket for March Madness gives them 19%. So, 3% seems very, very low in comparison
Yeah.
to all those the other college sports.
That is pretty ridiculous. I wrote this down because I found it in an article. And it was like, so if the 12-team playoff had been a thing for the last 7 years, the 12-team proposal would have only included 4 teams that finished outside the committee's final top 12 rankings, the worst of which was ranked 20th, and all 4 of those were group of 5 conference champions. So that would be the argument that I could see is like, oh, do we really think like what are we doing with the 12 teams? Like that's too many. Like they're not the best. Like the 11 and 12, they have no chance to beat one or whatever. But I mean, that stat stood out to me because it's like, well, it's not like these teams are scrubs. They won their fucking conference almost every time. Like they're still good. Like maybe they're not Bama, they're not Clemson, but I think giving these teams just a chance, like you said, when we were talking about UCF, just a chance to be there is what it's all about because it's literally they've never had it before, which is just crazy. Here's my next question. How do you think this is going to affect the scheduling? So you mentioned it's going to be, 3 extra games bumping up to what, 16 games. Do you think we'll see these fringe teams? Let's look at a team like North Carolina in the ACC. Realistically, they're behind Clemson, right? Do you think this would encourage them to schedule a bigger Power 5 non-conference opponent? Or would you think it would encourage them to schedule somebody lower to guarantee, a winning out in the non-conference?
So I'll actually touch on the two points you just talked about, kind of interlaced there.
Mm-hmm.
What you were talking about with the G5 teams being the only ones that were outside of what we would consider the committee's top 12. Firstly, I think we need to get rid of preseason rankings. People will say the committee is different and they're not influenced. I entirely disagree. For the most part, the AP polls, the coaches polls line up. I mean, I don't want to say entirely, but almost all the teams from I'd say 1 to 16 are almost identical. And I think a big part of that is these, preseason polls where what are you basing that on? Sure, a team might return a bunch of people, but you might lose coaching staff there for it. We just saw a very bad season from LSU. Yeah, they lost Joe Burrow, who is probably the best quarterback to go through that school, but they lost a ton of coaches, and that was a big part of why they heard. I don't want to say awful, but they weren't a championship contender, that's for sure.
Right.
So I think getting rid of the preseason ranking is number one, because those teams, like you said, that are finishing around 20, they probably weren't ranked 20th. I mean, 2018 UCF, you said, would have fallen into the 12th spot, I believe. They probably were better than 12. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at those rankings, but I want to say at that time, I think most people consider them about 8 or 9, outside of the 4 teams, obviously, but still, they get in that scenario, they get the home game instead of the away game if they're that much higher in the rankings.
So actually in 2018, they would have been the number 8. So they would have got a home game. Okay. They would have hosted Washington in Orlando.
Okay.
And then
maybe I'm thinking of 2017 then.
Yes, you are. 2017, they would have gone on the road to Tuscaloosa to play Alabama as a 12 versus 5.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that is step one, and then that if that happens, like you said, a team like Carolina. So Carolina is a good team. They will likely, on 90% of occasions, not beat Clemson.
Yeah, right.
So in the scenario where the ACC champion automatically gets in, if you're Carolina, the consideration, like you said, is, are we scheduling now cupcakes to get that free win, or are we scheduling tough teams? And I think the thing that the committee values the most is strength of schedule. I think that they'll never really say it because they give off, their pre-written notes all the time. It's, robotic almost how they say that they deal with their rankings. But I think strength of schedule is probably the biggest consideration, obviously outside of, going undefeated and winning. So if you're a team like North Carolina, scheduling the cupcake team is probably not great for them because they're going to lose to Clemson pretty much almost guaranteed. So let's take out the conference championship scenario out for them. To bolster their schedule now, they need probably a good win or like a very quality loss. So
Mhm.
I don't think scheduling a cupcake for a team like that is very good. But I do. I mean, for some teams, it may be. There could be. I think we should eliminate a lot of cupcake games, considering these schedules are going to get so long now. Like the SEC almost always plays two, one at the beginning of the season, and then
One in like the middle of the year when
yeah, like
everybody
right.
else is playing conference games. It's like fucking
Yep,
Alabama's playing Troy.
yep. Like it's usually right before their rivalry game. They'll do a rivalry, and then they'll do a bye week before usually like the Alabama LSU game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for a team like Alabama, you're eliminating that solely because the kids aren't they shouldn't be playing all those extra games, or at least you don't want to put them through the extra time on the field. So yeah, like for a team like Alabama, you might cut it. You might cut a cupcake. For a team like North Carolina, you're probably trying to just schedule a decent team, but I think it's more beneficial to schedule a better team, out of conference, maybe like a mid-pack Big Ten or something, because
Mm-hmm.
to me that looks better on your schedule to the committee when you're being ranked. So
Right.
yeah,
And
it'd be interesting to see. It's going to be a nice song and dance between all these teams scheduling in the future, especially with a lot of games already set in stone. I mean, as everyone has seen, they'll schedule games as far out as like 2032. So
oh
uh,
yeah, love those tweets. We've just come to an agreement with a home and home in
yeah,
2034. See you
yeah,
guys there. Tickets available now. Mark your calendars down.
yeah,
I actually remember when I was in college, I had four of my best friends went to Ball State University in Muncie, in Indiana, and it was like before they even got on campus, they announced they were playing Illinois, so in our hometown in Champaign when we like got like our senior year. And my buddy's dad bought tickets like as soon as they announced it, like 5 years in advance. So I definitely know that. I think I just saw Illinois announced a game like a series they're playing in like 2028. It's like, oh, thanks for the heads up.
yeah,
Um, what I wanted to talk about next, affecting scheduling. Actually, I want to go back to that a little bit. And I said North Carolina because they're just a team that's off the top of my head. Like, just think any middle tier Power Five team. Like, you're gonna have to up it a little bit. And I just think, as far as like a fan's perspective go, we're going to see more big time ESPN, ABC primetime games in this non-conference schedule. I mean, who doesn't want that? But I just don't really know. I obviously there's going to be some teams that try to zig while other teams zag, but I just think it's going to be very interesting to see how these teams handle it. From scheduling, from recruiting, because it changes everybody's recruiting pitch, right? It's like even like I'm an Illinois fan, you're a UCF guy. UCF's head coach, Illinois' head coach could now go in and be like, hey, we have a legitimate chance to actually play in the playoff every year. I mean, obviously, for everything would have to go perfect, everything would have to go right that year. But like you can't really say that with certainty to these recruits before now. So how much do you think this changes the recruiting game? Do you think we see more 4 and 5-star recruits going to these smaller schools, kind of betting on themselves, taking a chance? Or do you think it's going to be more of the same? Clemson, Bama, Oklahoma, Ohio State. I want to say Florida State, but they've kind of fallen off with their recruiting as of late.
yeah. So like I was kind of saying earlier, I think the biggest thing is just even if it's a far out dream, the announcement that there's going to be 12 teams is a guarantee that you at least have a shot. If you are any mid pack team in a Power Five, you have a shot because all you have to do is be ranked in the top 12. You no longer have to win your conference, which is, I mean, I would say, with the exception of Ohio State and Alabama, I can't remember. I mean, obviously Notre Dame, but that's because they're independent. I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember any team off the top of my head who slid in without being a conference champion of one of the big four conferences. Sorry, Pac-12, not going to include you here. I think the Bama year in
Bama slid in, right?
2014, maybe, they slid in over, I think, Ohio State. And
The-
there was another year, I think, where Ohio State did similar. So, I mean,
right.
out of
Weren't
four
there two
teams,
Big Ten teams in one year? Wasn't it? Was it
it,
Michigan State and Ohio State, or am I
it
wrong?
might have been the Ohio State year that think I just can't remember the year. I think Alabama and Ohio State were the two big ones who slid in without being the conference champions.
Right.
So yeah, these teams now can slide into a 12 spot, not be the champion. Obviously, you still want to be get that bye week, but uh, everyone has a chance now. So from a recruiting prospect, that's that's the biggest pitch you can give, I guess, as a recruiting coach. Hey, we now have a chance at the playoff, especially for kids who's either the kids themselves or their family who want them to stay, in state, stay close to family. They can
Hmm.
now do that. So yeah, it'll be, and like I said, the same with transfers now. Transfers can go anywhere and play without having to sit out. So, if something's not working, so, a team overpromised, or you've kind of progressed. Maybe you weren't as good in high school. You were 3-star, 2-star. You're playing at a G5 team, and all of a sudden you sprout and you're very, very elite. You can now transfer to one of those playoff teams that might take you on, who can slide into the 7, the 8, any of those mid-pack spots that had to play in the first round.
Yeah. So I think we were thinking of 2017. Ohio State got in over Alabama. I think that was the year Bama went like 12-1 or something like that. And there was an argument that they should have been in, but Ohio State got in over them. Because
Okay.
the year that I was thinking of, Michigan State was Clemson, Bama, Michigan State, and Oklahoma. Iowa would have been number 5 that year. Holy shit. I totally forgot about that. Wow. Uh, so what are you looking forward to most from this next season of college football, man?
I mean, a lot. This is the first season, or sorry, this is the first instance now we'll have where COVID is officially gone. The
Mm-hmm.
fans will be back for the most part. I mean, college sports or professional sports are going on right now, and I think for the most part we're at 50 to 75% capacity. I think by the time we're in August, maybe it's still not 100%, but I'm going to love to see the stadium is filled again, see the fans cheering on their teams without all these worries going on. So that's probably the biggest thing for me. Because the atmosphere makes a lot of these college games.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan hasn't been hot all that lately, but fans still pack the stadium when they can, and they go all out. So
Or like
um,
Nebraska has how many straight sellouts and they've just been dog shit for like
yeah,
how many years? It's just, I guess, I
exactly.
mean, if you live in Lincoln, Nebraska, there really is nothing else to do on a Saturday. But um, give me a little UCF preview. What should we expect from the Golden Knights this year?
Yeah, so like I said, Cincinnati is still looking very, very good as a team. Um, I, man, I want to be hopeful. I want to be hopeful, but that that Cincinnati team is very dangerous. And usually, I haven't looked at our schedule yet, but I've looked at it, but I can't recall it off the top of my head while we're here. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that if we play Memphis, those Memphis games are usually 140 total points. And it goes down to the last score. It's just a touchdown fest. So those are always very sketchy. But we still got Dylan Gabriel at QB. He's been developing very nicely, and new coaching staff. Malzahn out of Auburn, so that'll be interesting. He's been recruiting very, very well. Um, Maybe not obviously too early for this season, but the whispers on the side are that he's trying to pull all these players, out of programs, like from Alabama, from Auburn, because Auburn, I don't think gave him enough love. He's still a very good coach,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and he's got the recruiting power, pretty decent from a coaching, strategy standpoint. So to move from a team, from his last team being the SEC to UCF, that'll be an interesting development. I don't think people were too hot on Heupel his years here. Everything went downhill year after year.
And now
Losing,
he's in the SEC.
yeah, exactly. He's a Tennessee, so sorry, Tennessee.
Well, you mentioned it earlier. Tennessee took your athletic director, then
Yep.
they took your head coach. I know uh, they took. I think he brought multiple coaches with. Alex Galesh used to be a coach at Illinois, who was a coach down at UCF. I think he's now like the offensive coordinator and recruiting coordinator for Tennessee. He came up with Hupel, so that's like a, I don't want to say an exodus, but they're stealing your dudes down there, man. But it'll be interesting to see that whole dynamic of Malzahn going from the SEC to the American, and who he really gets to come to UCF. What did you think about Mackenzie Milton's decision to transfer to FSU?
Yeah, you would rather it not be to a team like FSU. But listen, I don't think any fan of UCF would ever fault him for. He could have gone to USF, and I don't think people would have,
Mm-hmm.
taken some jabs at him, trolled him on Twitter. But just for what he went through, that I'm going to call it a horrific injury. I know that kind of injury does happen a decent amount, but I mean, to me, that was a very bad injury, especially when you get knocked out of playing for so long. Just to see him on the field again, I think is going to be great. I have friends who went to FSU, so I used to watch some of their games every year, anyways. And if he gets that starting role, I'll probably be watching most of their games. So yeah, I hope he does well, because for people who don't know, he went to the same school as Dylan Gabriel. He was kind of the reason Dylan Gabriel came to UCF both at Hawaii, and I think he just didn't want to stunt the development of Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to be our obvious starter, and I think as a team they want to see Milton, get some playing time again. That's the biggest thing. If he can play, I'm sure he really, really wants to get back on the field again. So there's no reason to have him sit behind Gabriel and put him in for a few plays so the fans can clap. I'd rather see him go to another team and get some playing time.
So yeah, do you think he'll be able to kind of bring FSU back to any like relevancy, any success? I mean, I don't. What does he have? Does he have one season left too?
To be honest,
I don't even know.
he's super, super. He's gotten 2 exemptions, I think. I know one obviously for the injury, and I think he also got a red shirt. And I don't know if he'll get some sort of transfer thing going on. But yeah, he's probably on like his 7th year at this point. So we'll see.
Oh, what are your thoughts on the transfer portal? Do you think, like, I think it's a great idea. Obviously, you talked about the one-time transfer rule where they're immediately eligible now, even in conference. But the thing we see with the transfer portal is there's like almost more people in the portal than there are spots for them to go. Obviously, if I'm like, my philosophy on this, I want everybody to be happy. I want everybody to be in a situation where they feel like they can prosper and be successful. But do you think that guys maybe pull the trigger on leaving these schools a little too quickly?
Yes and no. I guess it's probably player dependent here.
Mm-hmm.
For the SEC, for example, I mean, a lot of this has to do with the coaching change. But in terms of most outgoing transfers, Tennessee is at 20 plus. I want to say they're at 25. It might have been a little bit less. But I know they're over 20. That's a lot of players to lose.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you never want some scenario where it just turns into, some batshit crazy, everyone's transferring everywhere scenario, because, losing 24 kids in an off season, that's a lot.
That's
I think
it's more than both of your your starting units.
right. Yeah. So, I mean, that'll make some teams kind of scramble. But I think giving this whole new in-conference exemption where you can play immediately, I think that will help, because the turnover, I think for the most part, will be regional. So we won't see kids transferring from, teams like Auburn over to Washington and, an entirely different coast, basically. I think they'll try to stay regional around where their families are, where the families can still, make a day trip in the car to go see them play.
Mm-hmm.
So sure, Tennessee might be losing 24 players, but now that in conference can transfer, they've got a new coaching staff in Heupel, who's also at Missouri, which is an SEC team. So he's got, some recruiting knowledge there in the SEC already. They're probably going to be fine because they can just pull, from these other teams who are losing transfers. Like you got Mississippi State, Auburn, Georgia, Missouri, LSU, Texas A&M, all more than 10 outgoing transfers as well. Tennessee is obviously the outlier, but I'm sure some of those kids will still be considering, moving to Tennessee. So I think
Yeah.
after a rough maybe starting period of like 2 years, I think everything will iron itself out, and teams will be fine.
Yeah, I think so too. So let's do some like final thoughts on this expansion proposal. What we think, when we think it's going to happen, if we think it's actually going to happen. So I'll go through it. 12 teams, 6 conference champions, top 4 get a first round bye, 6 at-large bids. So that could be from Power 5, could be from G5. It guarantees at least one spot for a G5 champion. So the top group of 5 champion will get a top 6 seed in this playoff scenario. Notre Dame will not be eligible to get a first round bye unless they join a conference. We did see them play in the ACC last year. I guess quickly I'll ask this question. Do you think Notre Dame will ever change their course as an independent, like if this gets rolling and try to join a conference?
Yes. I know, I'm sure you've had Tom on this show before, so people are familiar with him. The Notre Dame fan, we talked about this during the season. A big thing is the TV contract. Obviously, it's all about that money. But I think with this test, I think obviously COVID very bad, but in this scenario, COVID good because we got to see a little preview of Notre Dame in a full blown conference with conference title at stake. They played in the title game, so obviously they held their own. I think once the next TV contract is up, if this 12-team proposal goes through, they're going to have to. Like I said, these kids, 18, 19, even 20 is still pretty young. Those extra games, those would be rough, especially for kids, playing in those playoff games 3 years in a row. So I don't think Notre Dame is going to want to just, sit and be complacent with that 5 seed every time. That bye week is huge, and it also guarantees the home game. The home game. I mean, I don't think those games are going to be also on campus. I'm sure they'll be slotted into the bigger bowls, but we'll call it a home game. So yeah, from that perspective, they're basically weighing money versus success, I guess, because you're guaranteed to play the extra game every time if you don't join a conference. So I don't know. Maybe the committee tweaks the format a little. We'll see here when they finalize their thoughts on it and the new format. But yeah, if I'm the Notre Dame AD, I'm instantly getting in touch with the ACC to get in there once the current TV contract expires, because that's just you're putting too much on fate, I guess, when you have to play that extra game every year.
Right. Well, that's really interesting to me is Jack Swarbrick, the Notre Dame athletic director, was part of this 4-man committee that came up with this idea. And he said, this was one of the sacrifices we had to make, but it's for the greater good of college football. And I mean, obviously he still believes that Notre Dame could be a top 12 team every year. One more question I have. So the top 4 get a first round bye. Would you rather be the number 4 team and get that bye, or number 5 and get that home game? Because you're going to be pretty much guaranteed to be favored in that home game. That looks good for recruiting. You're going to have an insane crowd. Would you rather be the 4 seed, or would you rather be the 5 seed?
Are you talking in a first round scenario?
Yeah, so the first round. So would you rather take that bye and you miss out on a home game? Assuming it stays the same and they keep it where the bowl games would be the quarterfinals in round 2. So would you rather be ranked 4th, get that first round bye, or would you rather be ranked 5th? You got to play in the first round, but it's a home game and you're playing the 12th seed.
Yeah, 10 times out of 10, I'm taking the bye week.
Okay.
Like I said, just because you get that extra rest. I think one of the interesting things we'll see here going forward is how they schedule this. Obviously, we had different scheduling this year because of COVID, but typically there's a 2-week break between the conference championships and start of bowl season, and where they would be putting these first round playoff games.
Hmm.
Essentially, if you're the number 4 seed getting the bye there, you're guaranteed that 2-week break. Whereas, unless they move scheduling around completely or take an entire week off the season, so teams are playing one less game, you're getting probably 1 week break before what it should be a massive game in the playoff. So yeah, I mean, yeah, sure, like you said, 5 plays a 12 seed, but we've seen teams slip up who are very good, who might fall in the rankings, but give them some problems at the number 5 seed. So I'd much rather have the bye every single time here.
Yeah, I get that. I don't disagree with you. I just thought that's interesting because just the thought of a home game for any of these teams with a playoff scenario just seems insane. Like, can you imagine if LSU gets one of like these 5 through whatever? Like, people always say there's nothing like Baton Rouge at night. Like, I
Death Valley
cannot,
is amazing.
I cannot even imagine, man. So 12 teams, 6 conference champions, 6 at-large bids. Do you think this is going to work? Do you think it gets approved on Tuesday?
I think yes, but I am hopeful for a few tweaks.
Okay.
A scenario. So I mean, like I said, eight to me is perfect. I think it seems maybe they just didn't want to act like they were wrong. And with everyone saying 8 teams is the way to go, they're like, no, we're going to do 12. We're right, not you.
I
Um,
think I had read something like when they talked about the 8, they said it would be like almost not expanding because you wouldn't be guaranteeing any like at-large bids. You would go down to 3 at-large bids, I think. Um, Instead of technically would just be 4 in what their current setup is. So I think that was the argument against, but I don't hate 8 teams. I can see that being the most natural, but I kind of like 12 teams. I kind of like the proposal, but I do think it needs a few tweaks. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but yeah, keep going.
no, I was just going to say quickly. So kind of going through all the scenarios like a madman. Obviously, nothing is even set in stone, and I'm still trying to think of ways to pick apart.
Yeah.
Mainly just because I don't like the bye week. But so a scenario that I came up with. This is just going to be example teams. So don't take it as gospel or anything. But something that kind of irks me if we see scenarios like this, and I think we will see scenarios like this in a few conferences, is the fact that the top 4 seeds will always be a Power 5 conference championship or conference champion. So, example here, we have an Alabama going, let's say, 11-0. They're number 1 in the nation. Obviously, like very obviously the best team.
Mm-hmm.
We can even say like last year, for example. And then they play a team like, let's say, an 8-3 Florida team who's ranked like number 16 or something outside of the top 12. So not making the playoff at this time. They're playing them. Those 2 teams are playing an SEC championship, and Florida wins the game by a single score. Right? It's a very close game.
Mm-hmm.
In this scenario, Alabama is forced down to number 5, despite the fact that in most other ranking scenarios, they're not going to be penalized that much for losing 1 score in the conference championship game if they're number 1 and 11-0. They would probably drop down realistically to like number 3, and now they're forced into number 5 spot and have to play that extra game. They can no longer get a bye just because of this rule. And also, Florida now automatically jumps from number 16 to number 4 and gets a free bye week just because of 1 win. I mean, sure, you won the conference championship and you beat a very good team, but are you in that scenario? When have we ever seen a jump that high in the rankings? I'm sure it's maybe happened a few times, but from like 16, 17, 18, all the way to 4, just because of a single rule that says, oh, top 4 Power 5 teams guaranteed a bye week. I mean, that seems a little ridiculous to me. So I'm hoping they tweak something like that, because I don't want to see an 8-3 Florida getting a bye week at into the number 4 spot, or any. I'm sure similar. Ohio State fans, if they get beat in the conference championship game, they don't want to see a team like Penn State jump from number 16 to number 4 and they're forced now to play number 12 in the first round. That rule I don't like at all, but we'll see.
I didn't even think about that. I not at all. That's a great point that you just brought up. Is that the only thing you would change? Anything else come to mind?
I mean, we'll have to see come the 22nd what the finalized rules are. But yeah, I mean, obviously going to 8 teams. But
Yeah.
no, as far as the 12 team format, yeah, that's my biggest gripe. I will give them credit though for the on campus home games for the first round. Though I think that's a great idea. I was asking for that. I think a lot of people were asking for that if it went to an 8 team scenario, um, just because you're going to have bowls fighting for that first round, anyways, and
Mhm.
I don't really want to give it to them. I'd rather see number 1 play number 8 at say Alabama or
Right.
something like that, and then just give the semifinals and finals their regular bowl game spots with the big bowls. But yeah, that's my only big gripe right now is the automatic top 4 seed.
Do you think we'll still get like traditional like regular bowl games along with this as well? Just probably less.
Yeah, they'll probably have to cancel some, which I think will, for the most part, be fine because some of these are very financially questionable. There's been, I mean, there's been times where Bulls are waiting until like 2 weeks before for a sponsor. So, uh, I mean, sure, I'm sure the cities want to still host them.
You don't want to play in the legendary Cherry Bundy Boca Raton Bowl.
The Cherry Bunny, the the Bad Boy Mower Bowl.
Yeah, the bat, yeah, or the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Like, there's
Yeah,
so many. I mean, I'll miss that if that goes away. Just like the silly, ridiculous bowl game names that you get. But I mean, when you really think about it, they are really just glorified exhibition games. Like they don't really matter. But it is like those teams, fight super hard a lot. Fight super hard to get to 6-6, 7-5, get to that bowl eligibility. So I do like that aspect of it of rewarding the players, rewarding that team, for their hard work of getting, here's this meaningless bowl game. But I don't know. It's just going to be very interesting to see how everything changes. I know one of the proposals that they thought about doing was keeping the 4 teams, but having them play like the New Year's Six bowls and then doing the playoff after that. So those bowl games would kind of be serving as like quarterfinal matchups and almost like the last like round of qualifying. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I think it's going to get approved. I don't know if it's going to be 12 teams, but I think they're going to expand to something just because there's so much TV revenue that they know that they can hit on that they're just going to be missing out on so much money if they don't do it. Um, I think that's all. I think that's all I have, dude. I'm trying to think of more questions, but I think that's it. I think we hit it. So CFP expansion proposal, 12 teams. I'm not going to go through everything again. Brian McArdle from the Stands College Sports. Let's plug from the Stands one more time before we close it out. Where can everybody find everything? And then, I don't think we really have a schedule set in stone for this coming fall yet. That's what we're about to talk about when we bring Tom into this little meeting after this. But let's plug it for a second.
yeah. So you can find us on Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook at From the Stands Sports. No Instagram, no TikTok, nothing like that. But yeah, should be what late August, August 28th, I think is the first game. So
Listen, man,
not
my
long.
fighting Illini are playing Nebraska Cornhuskers week 0 in Champaign. You guys need somebody boots on the ground. I'm there, field
There you go.
reporter at the game. But no, I'm so excited for this college football season, man, because I cannot wait to dive back into the college football world, spending my Saturdays on my couch. And like you mentioned earlier, I cannot wait to see these fucking crowds, dude. They are
Yep.
going to go insane, man. So this is my real last question. Does someone else besides Alabama, Clemson, or Ohio State claim the 2021-2022 national championship in college football?
No.
No.
It's one of those 3.
Yeah.
I,
That's the safe bet. That is the safe bet.
yeah. I mean, sure, those teams always lose a ton of players. they refill them very easily. So
Yeah.
don't be fooled by all the analysts saying, "Oh, they lost so many starters." When has that ever really mattered
Yeah.
with those three teams?
Nick Saban just signed an extension this offseason. He'll probably coach till he can't walk, because I really don't know what he would do if he's not coaching football. I think he would just cease to exist. But this has been the Brew Party Podcast, episode number 65, with my man Brian McArdle from the Stands College Sports. Make sure you follow the Brew Party wherever you get your podcasts. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, or www.thebrewparty.com has all of our social media links, all of our episodes, and links to listen. Follow us on Twitter at The Brew Party. We're also on Instagram at The Brew Party. We're on Facebook at The Brew Party Podcast. And then throw us a subscription on YouTube, youtube.com/The Brew Party. This episode is available now wherever you get your podcasts on YouTube. Go ahead, give us a like, give us a rating, give us a review on Apple Podcasts, trying to get up to 100 reviews there. Brian, thank you so much for joining us. This has been the Brew Party Podcast. Wherever you're at, whenever you're listening to this, watching this, enjoy the rest of your day, weekend, night. I don't give a shit. I just thank you so much for tuning in.